All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to My Vote Counts. This will be our first session for September, and we are so glad that you could join us for today's important session where will cover all things absentee voting, voting from home, by mail, or at your local clerk's office. As always, before we get started, there are a few important things we'd like to share with you. First is that you can visit michigan.gov/vote, and it is your one-stop shop for all of your important elections information. At that site, you can register to vote, update your voter information, check your registration status, ask for and track an absentee ballot, view a sample ballot, and find your local clerk information and your polling place information. There are also a few important election dates that we'd like for you to keep in mind. The statewide general election will take place Tuesday, November 8th. By Monday, October 24th, you must register to vote online at michigan.gov/vote or by mail. That is the final day that you can register online. After that day, if you want to register to vote, you have to do so in person at your local clerk's office. Monday, October 24th is also the recommended date to request an absentee ballot to avoid potential mailing delays. And it is the recommended date to return your absentee ballot by mail to also avoid those potential mailing delays. Friday, November 4th at 5 p.m. is the deadline to request an absentee ballot be mailed to you. You can also visit your clerk's office through Monday, November 7th at 4 p.m. to vote early in person with your absentee ballot at your city or township clerk's office. And you will have to, if you visit at that day, you will have to cast your ballot on the spot at your clerk's office. And by 8 p.m. on election day, you must return your signed absentee ballot by hand to your local clerk's office or drop box. And you can also register to vote in person at your city or township clerk's office. All right, so we're going to move on to today's subject, which is about all things absentee voting. So I will hand it over to Megan Shar. Megan?
Thanks, Sarah. So because of Proposal 18-3 from 2018, all registered Michigan voters can vote absentee. So you don't have to provide any reason in order to vote absentee. You can just fill out an absentee ballot application, and then you have that ability here in Michigan. So how do you request an absentee ballot? First, you have to complete an absentee ballot application in order to be issued your ballot. You can request an application online at michigan.gov/vote or by mail using the absentee ballot application form, or you can visit your local clerk's office in person and complete that absentee ballot application to receive your absentee ballot.
Thanks, Megan. And apologies, I forgot to mention at the top, as we're going through today's presentation, if anyone has any questions, feel free to submit your question using the Q&A feature in Zoom. So if you look along the Zoom menu, you'll see a button that looks like two speech bubbles with the letters Q&A. You can click that and submit a question during today's presentation, and we'll get to as many questions as we can after the conclusion of today's presentation. Back to you, Megan.
Thanks, Sarah. So all Michigan voters have to apply for an absentee ballot. You aren't just automatically sent a ballot. You have to complete an absentee ballot application and submit that to your local clerk's office. Again, no one's going to automatically receive a ballot from their local clerk's office. You must submit this absentee ballot application. You only need to submit one absentee ballot application. So you can either do that online, by mail, or in person at your local clerk's office. If you're concerned about the status of your application, go to that website Sarah mentioned, michigan.gov/vote, and you can track the status of your application at any time. It'll let you know where in the process it is. There is a permanent absentee voter list. So Michigan registered voters can sign up for the permanent absentee voter list to automatically receive an absentee ballot application. Again, that's to automatically receive an application, not a ballot. So that means your local clerk ahead of every election will automatically send you that absentee ballot application for you to complete and submit back to your local clerk in order to receive your ballot. Voters do not automatically receive a ballot by being on this list. Those who are on the list are not required to vote absentee in every election. By completing that absentee ballot application, that's what will help you receive your absentee ballot. But if you decide one election that you want to go vote in person, that's absolutely fine. Just don't complete the absentee ballot application that cycle. So receiving an absentee ballot application, again, voters cannot be issued an absentee ballot if they do not request one on an application from their local clerk's office. Voters may receive applications in the mail from third-party organizations. It's legal for third-party organizations to send out these applications before an election. Again, this is just an application that a voter then would have to complete and send to their local clerk's office to receive a ballot. So these groups can send out the applications prompting voters, if they would like to complete that, to do so to receive their absentee ballot. If you complete an application that was mailed to you by a third party, remember, you have to return it to your local clerk's office directly. You don't return it to that third party. You return it to your local clerk's office directly. When can you request your absentee ballot? If you want to do this online or by mail, you can do so up until 5 p.m. the Friday before the election, which for this general election is November 4th. But we recommend doing so early because of any potential mailing delays. So we really do recommend that the last day you request an absentee ballot online or by mail is October 24th, just to avoid any potential delays in the mail to make sure you get that ballot and your vote can be counted. If you want to do so in person, you can complete the application in person at your local clerk's office up until 4 p.m. the Monday before the election, which is November 7th. If you do so in person on Monday before 4 p.m., you do have to cast that ballot while you're in the local clerk's office and return it at that same time. What happens after you submit your application? Again, we're still in the application stage, not your actual absentee ballot. So your city or township clerk will review your application and verify that your signature matches the electronic record. They're going to look at your signature in the qualified voter file and verify that it's a match. If it's approved, your clerk will then mail you your absentee ballot. You can track when your absentee ballot is mailed to you by visiting that michigan.gov/vote. That's a great website with a bunch of resources on it. So I definitely recommend writing that down, especially if you're voting absentee, so you can track the status all throughout the process and know right where it is. Lastly, you're going to complete and sign your absentee ballot and return it to your local clerk's office. You can return your signed and completed absentee ballot by mail or in person at a local drop box designated by your local clerk's office or at your local clerk's office. Again, just like if you're voting in person, your ballot has to be received by 8 p.m. on election day in order to be counted. So if it's the Friday before the election, I would highly encourage you to go drop that in a drop box or at your local clerk's office as opposed to putting it in the mail, just to ensure that everything's there and can be counted on time.
Great. And just to clarify, Megan, when you say received by your local clerk, that means if I put my ballot in the mail and it's still in transit and not at my clerk's office delivered, then it will not be counted. Is that correct?
Correct. It needs to be in the hands of your local clerk to be counted by 8 p.m. on election day.
Got it.
So completing an absentee ballot. To be counted, a completed and signed absentee ballot must be received, again, by 8 p.m. on election day, in the hands of your local clerk by 8 p.m. on election day. When you're completing your absentee ballot, it's important to carefully read all of the instructions and make your selection using a black or blue ink pen. Enclose your completed absentee ballot in the secrecy sleeve, and there's a perforated tab at the top that will stick out of the secrecy sleeve. Make sure that that numerical barcode is visible outside of the secrecy sleeve. It needs that, and that barcode needs to be attached. You can't separate that while completing your vote. Then you're going to take your secrecy sleeve and provide it in the return envelope. And then you're going to sign, seal, and date on the designated spot on the outside of the return envelope. For this election, your absentee ballot may come with either a purple or a green return envelope. Some clerks are still cycling through the last of their green envelopes before making the transition to purple. Either of those are fine, so don't be concerned if you see one color or another. Signature verification. Once your absentee ballot application and then later your ballot come into your local clerk's office, the local clerk is responsible for verifying that the voter's signature matches their signature in the qualified voter file. Typically, this is going to be the signature on your driver's license or state ID. The local clerks and their staff receive training through the Bureau of Elections and the Michigan Elections e-learning center on how to conduct this type of signature verification. And a clerk may reject an absentee ballot application or the absentee ballot itself if the signature cannot be verified. If this is the case, the clerks are instructed to make every attempt to contact a voter without delay if there's an issue with their application or with their ballot. So if the signature is missing or it does not match one on file, clerks are instructed to reach out and attempt to contact that voter in order to correct the issue or resolve the issue. Okay, who can help you with your absentee ballot? There are certain individuals that are listed that can help you complete your absentee ballot and certain individuals that can help you return your absentee ballot. So if you need some help completing your ballot, filling out the information, that can be done by a member of your household or your immediate family, or by a deputized election official or election assistant. So someone within the clerk's office that's designated to help individuals. Anyone else, anyone besides the voter that helps the voter complete their ballot has to sign the designated certificate space on the outside of the return envelope. This is really important. So if you need help, that's perfectly fine. Have someone in your household or family or from the clerk's office help you complete that ballot so your vote can get in, but make sure they sign that return envelope as well. If you just need assistance with returning your absentee ballot, that can be done by someone in your household, someone in your immediate family, a professional mail carrier, so someone from the postal service, or again, a deputized election official, so the clerk can help identify those individuals. It's very important to know that it is a felony in Michigan for anyone outside of those people to possess or deliver a ballot, regardless of whether it's been voted. So individuals cannot go around and collect other ballots from people in their neighborhood and return them. That is against the law in Michigan. It can only be one of these named individuals. And there may be certain exceptions to accommodate emergency situations, but again, I would stick to this list to ensure that you are following the law. So with an absentee ballot, you can also vote in person at a clerk's office. You can go into your clerk's office and request an absentee ballot up until the Monday before the election, so November 7th. You can choose to vote your absentee ballot and complete it while you're in your local clerk's office and return it to them at that same time. So if you don't need any additional time or assistance, you can just use a pen in your clerk's office, complete it, sign the return envelope, and return it to your clerk right then and there. Or again, you can choose to take your ballot home and vote in the privacy of your home and take your time casting that ballot, but it needs to be back at the clerk's office by 8 p.m. on election day. If you vote early with an absentee ballot at your clerk's office, it's important to know it's not tabulated or counted in any way until election day. Per state law, ballots cannot be counted until election day. So if you vote early, it is securely stored by your local clerk's office, and then it's counted on election day when all the other votes are counted for in-person voters. Per Proposal 18.3, eligible citizens can register to vote at their local clerk's office up to and on election day. So if you're not yet registered to vote, you can go into your clerk's office and register on election day, and then you can choose to cast an absentee ballot then and there in the clerk's office. If you are going to vote absentee, you're going to have to do it at the same time as registration, and you're going to have to hand your completed absentee ballot back to the clerk at that time. You can also receive a registration receipt and go vote in person if you have time to do that. But again, all votes have to be done by 8 p.m. on election day, so keep that in mind. Accessible absentee voting. So accessible ballots allow voters with disabilities to use an electronic device, some type of their own assistive technology, without having to visit the polling place or a clerk's office. So you have to apply to have an accessible absentee ballot by submitting the accessible absentee ballot application, and that needs to be to your local clerk's office by 5 p.m. the Friday before the election, so November 4th for this election. After you submit this form, instead of receiving a paper ballot, voters receive a link to the accessible ballot that then they can use their own assistive technology at home to complete that vote. The voter must complete the ballot. They must print it, place it in an envelope, and sign the back of the envelope to return to the local clerk's office by 8 p.m. on election day. Again, if a voter needs assistance in completing this, they can have one of those listed individuals help them complete their ballot and return it. They just need to sign the envelope as well. Military and overseas voters. So for registered Michigan voters who are stationed or residing overseas, they can also request an absentee ballot from the local clerk's office. Again, here it's important to take into account timing of the mail when you are an overseas voter. So eligible citizens who are living overseas can register to vote and request their absentee ballot through the federal postcard application. And if you are a voter who's deployed, stationed, or just residing overseas, and you do not request your absentee ballot from the clerk in time, you can submit a federal write-in absentee ballot to submit to your local clerk's office in time for election day. For more information on this, go to fvap.gov, and that's a great resource for military and overseas voters. Returning an absentee ballot. Again, I cannot stress this enough. If you're voting absentee, it's got to be in the hands of your local clerk by 8 p.m. on election day for that vote to be counted. So how can you return your ballot? Similarly to requesting your ballot, there's a few different options for you. You can put your completed absentee ballot in the mail And for this, again, we're recommending no later than October 24th, just to account for any mail delays, to make sure that that vote is there by the deadline and it can be counted. Or you can find a designated drop box. Your local clerk will have information on where these designated drop boxes are, and it would need to be in the drop box by 8 p.m. on election day. The local clerk will arrange for those to be picked up and then tabulated on the night of election day. Or again, you can go over, visit your local clerk's office and drop off your absentee ballot in person by 8 p.m. on election day. So what happens after submitting an absentee ballot? Just like with the absentee ballot application, your city or township clerk is going to verify the signature. So you've signed the return envelope and they're going to verify that that matches what's in the electronic record or the qualified voter file. If your signature is verified, your ballot is securely stored until election day. Again, it's a state law that election administrators cannot count ballots until the day of the election. So there's no pre-counting or anything like that. They will be stored until election day for tabulation. On election day, the clerk's office then removes your completed absentee ballot in its secrecy sleeve and it is tabulated. So if you vote absentee and you have a change of heart before the election, what can you do? If you have already submitted your absentee ballot, you can spoil it. There's a couple different ways you can do this. One is by mail. You can write a request to your local clerk's office and sign it, indicating that you would like to spoil your ballot. This has to be received by the local clerk's office by 5 p.m. the Friday before election, November 4th. If you're spoiling a ballot that has already been submitted, you can also bring a written request, again signed, to your local clerk's office until 10 a.m. the Monday before the election, which is November 7th. So if you're doing it by mail, it's got to be there by 5 p.m. the Friday before. If you're spoiling it in person, 10 a.m. the Monday before. If you have not yet submitted your absentee ballot, you can also spoil your vote. And you can submit a written and signed request by 4 p.m. on Monday before the election, indicating that you do not wish to vote absentee. Also, if you have not completed your absentee ballot, you can bring that to your polling place on election day and spoil your absentee ballot that way and then choose to vote in person. So if you've already filled out your absentee ballot but you have not submitted it, you can make that written request. But if it's on election day and you wish to vote in person, you can take it to the polling place. We do encourage you, if you know you need to spoil your ballot because you marked something incorrectly, or you're just choosing not to vote absentee and you'd rather vote in person at this point, spoil your ballot as early as possible at the clerk's office to allow them more time to prepare, and so that we're not causing a delay on election day. We prefer that you do that as far in advance as possible, but obviously things come up. So if you need to do it on the polling place at election day, you can surrender that ballot there as well. So again, michigan.gov/vote. This is going to be your one-stop shop. You can track your absentee ballot application, your absentee ballot, see when that's mailed from your local clerk, but you can also get sample ballots here. So if you're just wondering who is going to be on the ballot, and you want to see what proposals are on there and what your local ballot looks like, go to michigan.gov/vote. That's a great place to get that sample ballot.
All right. Thank you so much, Megan. It was a lot of really great information about absentee voting. I think that's one of the subjects that we at the Department of State get the most questions about. So really valuable information there to share with your community. All right, now we're going to talk about making a plan to vote for November. So Michigan voters have options for casting a ballot. There are a couple things you want to keep in mind and do before you vote. So first is verify your voter information at michigan.gov/vote. You can update your voter registration online or by mail up to 2 weeks before an election or at your local clerk's office leading up to and on election day. It's important that you visit that website to check, are you registered? And are you registered at your current address? Next, you can review your sample ballot at michigan.gov/vote. So you can take a look at what's going to be on your ballot in November. The sample ballot includes everything that will appear on your ballot. And next, pay attention to dates and deadlines to ensure your ballot can be received in time. We've gone over a lot of dates and deadlines in today's presentation, and they're very important to remember in the lead up to November. Make a plan to vote, and you can help ensure registered voters in your community do the same. So not only does this information benefit you, but it also helps benefit your family, your friends, your loved ones, and members of your community when you share this information with them. So first, in making a plan, you want to choose where to vote. And you have options for that, as we've discussed here today. You can vote at home or at your clerk's office with an absentee ballot, or you can vote at your polling place on election day. Second, if you're voting absentee, make sure to submit your absentee ballot application. And when you receive your absentee ballot, you can determine how you will return it to your local clerk's office and when you will return it to your local clerk's office. And we talked a lot about options for returning your absentee voter ballot here today as well. And number 3 is the most important step in making a plan to vote. It's that follow through piece. Number 3 is vote. If voting absentee, request and return your absentee ballot by 8 p.m. on election day. If you're voting in person, visit your polling place between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. and make sure you get your I voted sticker too while you're at it. And now that you know all of this valuable information, you can empower voters in your community to make a plan to vote as well. You can inform voters in your community about the right to vote absentee. As we said before, Michigan is a no reason absentee voter state, meaning that you don't have to have any reason at all to vote absentee. You can educate others on how to request an absentee ballot and their options for returning their ballot by 8 p.m. on election day. Another thing you can do is share trusted resources and verified information on accessible voting with your network. You can visit michigan.gov/SOS Partners in Democracy. We have a bunch of voter education materials there that are ready for you to share with your network in person, on social media, and they have language and accessibility resources and more. Next, you can help others make a plan to vote. Follow those steps that we just went through on the last page with some of the members of your community. And finally, debunk and pre-bunk misinformation. Now, what do we mean by pre-bunk misinformation? What we mean by that is, at this point, we all know some of the frequently heard elections misinformation that circles out in social media and are circulated throughout communities. So we can help debunk that misinformation by making sure we go back to the second point here and share trusted resources and verified information, like the resources and information shared by our office at that website right there, michigan.gov/SOS Partners in Democracy. So if members of your community know the accurate information, when they come across some misinformation, they'll know that doesn't sound right, or I know that's not accurate. That's what we mean by pre-bunking. And make sure you only share that accurate information from trusted sources. So if you see something that doesn't look right or looks off on social media, maybe don't share it. You can visit michigan.gov/SOS fact check for more information. Lots of really great info on that site. All right, it's time for my favorite part of our sessions, the question and answer. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions about absentee voting or any elections topic, you can submit it in the Q&A function using Zoom. It's the button along the Zoom menu that says Q&A and has 2 speech bubbles. We'll get to as many questions as we can today that have been submitted live. But in addition to our live questions, we also have a lot of questions that you all submitted when signing up for today's session. So we'll get to those first. And Megan, if you're ready, I'll start with our first one.
That sounds good, Sarah.
All right, first question. I did not ask for an absentee ballot, but I received one anyway. Why did this happen?
So, as we mentioned during the presentation, per state law, voters have to submit an absentee ballot application in order to receive an absentee ballot from their local clerk's office. It's likely that you received the application and not the ballot itself. Organizations, including political parties and local clerk's offices, are legally allowed to send out these applications to voters, even if you don't request an application. If you're not sure whether you were sent an absentee ballot application or an absentee ballot that you requested, remember, you must complete the application first. You can track this all online at michigan.gov/vote. You can also determine what you received based off the design and the contents of the envelope you received. Absentee ballots are mailed by your local clerk's office only, and they're in a white and blue envelope, and they're going to contain your absentee ballot, a secrecy sleeve, which is typically manila, and then a return envelope, which right now is going to be purple or green, and it's addressed to your local clerk's office. And the absentee ballot application is just the application form typically that you're going to be receiving. So there's a difference in the contents. So that can help you identify what it was that you actually got.
Great question. Thanks, Megan. Next one up. I received an absentee ballot application for someone who does not live at my address. What should I do?
So if you received an official mailing from the state or the local clerk's office that's addressed to someone that no longer resides at the listed address, the best way to handle it is to write on the mailing that the recipient no longer lives at the provided address and return it to your local clerk's office for handling. There's 2 reasons that this might occur. If it's from a group other than the state of Michigan or your local clerk, it's possible that they're just working off of dated address lists and they're not the most up to date. So they're working off of an older voter registration list for their mailing. If you receive an official mailing from the state or your local clerk, it's possible that the resident previously resided at your address and either failed to cancel or update their voter registration before moving, or moving away or being inactive. And they have to remain on the voter registration list for 2 federal election cycles before they can be removed. So that might be why you got an official mailing for someone that's no longer at your address.
What should I do if I don't receive my absentee ballot in the mail by election day?
If you don't receive your absentee ballot in the mail for whatever reason, visit your local clerk's office to request your AV ballot by Friday before election day, or you can cast your ballot or your vote in person at the clerk's office by 4 p.m. on Monday. You can also visit your polling place on election day. So if it's down to election day and you don't have your absentee ballot, you can go to your polling place and indicate that you requested an absentee ballot, and they'll take additional steps to confirm whether or not you submitted your absentee ballot for counting. And then once that's verified, you'll be able to be issued a new ballot and cast your vote in person.
Great. is a question we see a lot. Why do I keep getting applications for an absentee ballot when I check the box to join the permanent absentee voter list?
So I know this is a bit confusing because you're on a permanent absentee voter list, but the permanent absentee voter list just guarantees you that an application is going to be sent to you before every election cycle. Some cases it's a dual application when there's multiple elections in one year, like this year where there was a primary in August and then the general election in November. But state law requires that you complete and submit that application every time in order to receive your absentee ballot. So that's why you're getting the application and not the ballot itself. This also gives you the freedom to choose whether you want to vote absentee at every election. Just because you're on the permanent absentee voter list doesn't mean you're prevented from ever voting in person. If one cycle you decide that you'd rather vote in person, just don't complete that application. Go to your polling place on election day and vote as you choose. So it also allows for that option for voters.
Thanks, Megan. And I think you answered one of the questions that I saw submitted in the live Q&A too, which is, why do we have to keep filling out applications? And I think your answer there was, it's state law.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any leeway there. That is an actual statute in our election law.
Great. Next question. What if an absentee voter forgets to sign or date their ballot? Are they returned to the voter to complete, assuming there's time to do that?
So if the voter fails to sign the certificate, or let's just say the signature doesn't match what's in the qualified voter file, and the clerk isn't able to complete that verification, the ballot is void and cannot be removed from the envelope or counted, and it's retained at the local clerk's office. The voter should be contacted immediately to visit the clerk's office to sign the envelope or otherwise provide signature verification, but the unsigned ballot cannot leave the clerk's office. So unless the clerk can immediately verify and correct the signature, the ballot should be marked rejected in the qualified voter file. The voter would see rejected status on michigan.gov/vote, another reason to bookmark that website. And if it's determined before 8 p.m. on election day that the signature is missing, again, that clerk is going to reach out to you as soon as possible, likely within 48 hours after the determination or before 8 p.m. on election day, whichever is sooner. And that's accounted for in the state law that the clerk has to do that.
Great. There is not enough space on the absentee ballot to sign my full legal name on my driver's license. Will my ballot be discarded if I use my initials or my hyphenated name?
So voters are encouraged to sign their absentee ballot applications and the actual ballot return envelopes in a way that it closely matches your driver's license or state ID as possible, and so that they sufficiently agree. The guidance provided to clerks on this issue indicates that if the signature is a recognized diminutive or like a shortened version of your full legal name, it is presumed a valid signature. If for some reason your signature has changed for whatever reason, contact your local clerk's office so that your voter file can be updated.
All right, next question. My neighbor recently received an AV application for his wife, who had died 4 years earlier. Why was her name still on the list? And if he had completed the application and voted in her name, how would it have been caught?
So the Michigan election law requires absentee ballots, the applications, to be signed in order for the ballot to be issued. It also requires that this signature verification that we've mentioned take place, and that signature is verified against the qualified voter file in order for any ballot to be tabulated. So in addition, the Michigan election law requires that the applications and ballots be accepted unless the signature does not sufficiently agree with the voter's signature on file. So local clerks perform regular maintenance of the QVF at least monthly, which we've discussed in a previous My Vote Counts presentation. And they remove names of individuals who have died. Most individuals who have died are removed in this way. The AV application includes that spot for a signature. So that's going to be your double check. If someone who has passed away receives the application, there's no way for them to sign it and for that signature verification to take place. So if an individual chose to impersonate the deceased individual, they are violating the Michigan election law. That is a felony. And so that verification, that signature verification, is what is ensuring that that deceased voter is not going to receive a ballot, or if it is a false signature, it won't sufficiently match.
Okay. The Michigan Secretary of State has notified me that I am registered in a new district. How do I apply for an absentee ballot for the August, or how do I apply for an absentee ballot? And is there a deadline for such application?
Yeah, so there was the recent redistricting. So many voters were assigned a new district. Hopefully, you've already hashed this out during the primary election and you know where your new district is. And if you want to vote absentee, you simply need to complete that absentee voter application and return it to your clerk's office. You can do that online or by mail. Or in person, and you have until 5 p.m. the Friday before the election. And if you're doing it in person, you have a little bit more time until 4 p.m. on Monday. But again, if you do it on Monday before the election, you have to complete your absentee ballot when you're there at the clerk's office and turn it in that same transaction.
Can you request an absentee ballot be sent to a different address than where you're registered to vote?
Yes, you can. You still need to provide your residential address that you use to register to vote on your application for absentee ballot. However, there isn't a place on that application to indicate that you want to provide an alternate address to mail your ballot to. And that's where your ballot would be mailed to at that point, rather than your residential address. The Postal Service does not forward ballots. So if you have mail forwarding on, that will not account for an absentee ballot. You need to provide that address on your absentee ballot application in order for it to go somewhere other than where you're registered to vote. And again, if you're down to the wire and there's a last minute change of plans, contact your city or township clerk, and hopefully you can get that worked out there.
Who can return my absentee ballot for me?
So again, there's a list of people that by law can return the ballot, and that's the voter themselves, a member of the voter's immediate family, a person residing in the voter's household, a mail carrier, so someone from the USPS, or an authorized election official. Anyone outside of those individuals that I just named, it is a felony for them to possess or deliver a ballot. And that doesn't matter whether it's been voted or not. If you possess a ballot that does not belong to you, that is a crime under the Michigan election law.
If I received a ballot because I asked to vote absentee, and I decided to walk to a polling place instead, what is the best thing to do with my absentee ballot? Should I bring it with me?
So you should bring it with you. Voters change their mind all the time. And if you decide that you'd rather vote in person, then you have to spoil your ballot that you're not using. So again, we encourage you to do this ahead of election day, by giving that ballot to your local clerk and indicating you wish to spoil it and vote on election day. But if you have not turned in your ballot, you can take that to the polling place on election day and spoil it there and then vote in person. So you do have that option, but we just encourage you, if you know ahead of time, take care of it, surrender your absentee ballot to the clerk's office. It'll just save time for everyone on election day.
Great. So those were all of the pre-submitted questions that we have. So now we will turn to a few of the live questions that have been submitted during today's session. So the first question I have for you, Megan, can a family member request an absentee ballot for another family member?
So no, unfortunately, that's not possible because a voter must sign and submit their own absentee ballot application. Even with a power of attorney, you cannot request an absentee ballot for another person because the voter themselves has to sign that application.
Great. Next question. How do I confirm whether I am on the permanent absentee voter list?
So the best way to do this is by contacting your local clerk's office. Voters can sign up for the permanent absentee voter list online at michigan.gov/vote or when they complete their application. Remember, if you're on the list, you're not receiving a ballot automatically. You're just receiving the application ahead of every election, and you do need to complete that to get your ballot sent to you.
Great. When can I request an absentee ballot application? I understand that the request for an absentee ballot application has to be made no later than October 24th, but what's the date that I can request one?
You can request an absentee ballot for the November 8th general election by completing the application as early as today. Application for absentee ballots can be requested 75 days before an election, but they're not mailed, and the ballots are not mailed until 40 days before an election, once the ballots have been printed and certified. So we recommend that you request your absentee ballot as soon as possible if you know that that's how you want to vote. But again, no later than that October 24th deadline. And that just ensures that you have enough time for the mail to take your application to the clerk, it be processed, and then your ballot be mailed back to you. So get started on the process sooner rather than later.
Right. If a person loses their application, can they call the clerk and get another one?
Absolutely. So if you lose your application, don't worry. You can submit an application online or download and print it from that michigan.gov/vote website. Also, you can stop into your local clerk's office when they're open and ask them for another copy. So if you did mail it and you're just unsure if it went to the clerk's office or it's been processed, go to that michigan.gov/vote website. That's your best resource to track your application. So rather than just sending in a duplicate application, check the status online before taking any additional action.
Smart. Next question. Can absentee ballots be placed in drop boxes provided by local clerk's offices on election day?
Yes. So you do need to use the drop box indicated by your local clerk's office, not by a different township or city, but you can drop them in the drop box until 8 p.m. on election day. Just ensure that it's there no later than 8 p.m. on election day so that your vote can be counted. If you have questions as to where designated drop boxes are, you can go to that michigan.gov/vote website or contact your local clerk's office.
Great. And those are all of the live questions that we have time for right now. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a question, both before today's session and during. We really appreciate you. And like I said, the Q&A segment is always my favorite. So appreciate your input and questions. Thank you again to everyone who attended today. Be sure to tune in to next Tuesday's session, in which we will discuss the security of absentee voting and why no one can steal your vote or vote twice. You can sign up for that session in a link that will be sent to you after today's session concludes. And links to the recording and replay of today's session will also be included in that email. Thanks again to everyone who attended today, and be well.